EA Sports, within the game.
What's going on, all the Smoke family? We have reached the divisional playoffs in the league. I'm sorry we haven't got a chance to do a stream recently. We've been having a lot of schedule conflicts, so we hadn't been able to really do it. But we have reached the divisional round. As you see, the number 1 seed Miami Dolphins will be taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the number 2 seeded Baltimore Ravens will be taking on the Cincinnati Bengals for a third time. Actually, them two have played. They split the regular season series. Now we're going to get a chance to see who can actually get the job done in the playoffs against each other to see who will advance. Over in the NFC, we got the Arizona Cardinals getting ready for the New Orleans Saints, who pulled off a huge upset against Club Shay Shay and the New York Giants. And then you got Coach Kadarius Bailey and the Atlanta Falcons taking on Coach Finley and the Seattle Seahawks. The Falcons had a dominant win against the Green Bay Packers, and the Seahawks went on the road and pulled off an upset in Detroit. So, gonna get a chance to see those. These are the teams that are remaining. Let's see, can we click on the matchups from last week? We're gonna start with the Colts and the Ravens. As you see, the final score was 38-21. It was a tough ball game early on, and then the Ravens pulled away. Let's go to some of the player stats real quick. Justin Herbert almost had a perfect passer rating for 153.9 yards in the air. And he had 327 yards passing, 3 touchdowns and no picks. Dak Prescott had a very, very rough day at the office. He had 310 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 4 costly interceptions in that ball game to cost him a wild card victory. I know the Ravens are getting ready for a big game this week. We're going to go over to the rushing stats. J.K. Dobbins had 17 carries for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Javonte Williams, who's brought in from the New Orleans Saints, had 8 carries for 43 yards and a touchdown. So the Colts didn't really do a lot on the ground today in that game. Moving on to the receiving total, just to kind of give you guys an idea of how that day went for both teams. As you see, DK Metcalf had an outstanding day at the office, 5 for $145, 3 touchdowns. Mark Andrews also had an outstanding day at the office. The tight end had 5 catches for 142 yards, no touchdowns. Jelani Woods, the rookie out of Virginia, also had a pretty good day. He had 6 for 107 yards, no touchdowns. Michael Pittman, the receiver, is the one that scored the touchdown for the Indianapolis Colts. He had 2 for 62. As you see, the other tight end, Albert O, had 2 for 41. Alec Pierce had 2 for 33. And Noah Gray had a touchdown catch or 23 yards to make the game close. But again, the Ravens pulled this game off. Let's go to the defensive stats. Give us a second as it come up. Let it come up before I say anything about it. David Ojabo had 2 sacks on the day for the Ravens. Also, Jadeveon Clowney and Travis Jones, the rookie D tackle out of the University of Connecticut, had a sack as well. Let's go to the interceptions total. Let it come up on the screen. Okay, Jalen Armour Davis had a pick. Kyle Hamilton had a pick. Greedy Williams had a pick, and so did Marlon Humphrey. So the Ravens defense had a balance day at the office, and they found a way to win. So the Ravens are hosting another game in the playoffs for the as they try to move on to the AFC title game for the first time since their Super Bowl season in 2012. Now, moving along to the Titans and Jaguars. This game was one for the ages. These two guys played 3 times this year, and Buddy Buckets Didn't get a chance to win in the regular season, but he won when it mattered the most. He pulled off a playoff upset, winning 30-23 in the game. Let's go to the player stats. Let it come up. Zach Wilson had a not so good day at the office. He had a 242, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Whereas Trevor Lawrence, the Titans defense, had a pretty good day at the office, holding him to 119 yards with a touchdown and a pick. But as you see, it had to be won another way, and we're going to find out how that game was won. Travis Etienne continued his dominant year, had 26 carries for 102 yards, no touchdowns. Pacheco had 11 for 36, and Haskins had 1 carry for 15 yards. Let's go to the receiving total. George Pickens led both sides in receiving with 4 catches for $116, no touchdowns. Treylon Burks actually scored a touchdown for the Titans. He had 2 for 63 and a touchdown. Kadarius Toney had 2 for 58 and no touchdowns. He only had 2 catches in the game. The Jaguars' number 1 guy, who we all know was DJ Sharp, had a touchdown reception. He was 3 for 51 on the day. As you see, Zay Jones below had a 34-yard reception. He had that big reception in the fourth quarter to close the game out. Christian Kirk had 2 for 20. Etienne had 2 for 14. So let's continue and see what the defenses did in this game. So the sack leaders were Josh Allen and Sam Williams for the Jaguars. The Titans recorded 0 sacks in the game. And let's go to the interception total. Josh Allen had an interception. James Poyer, out of front, was traded to the Titans from the Buffalo Bills, had an interception for the Titans. Kadar Holtman actually had a pick 6, and Levi Wallace also had an interception. So the Jaguars find a way to win another wild card game. They've actually had the Titans' numbers in history in the playoffs. They've upset them a lot pretty often. But shout out to the Titans for a great season. Just unfortunate it fell like that. The Dolphins are going to be welcoming the Jaguars in a Florida matchup. Moving down to the third game, the Chargers and the Bengals. This was actually the first game played in the playoffs. The Bengals came on the road, and they held off a late Chargers rally to win their playoff game and move on to the divisional against Lamar Jackson and the LA Chargers. Let's go to the player stats. Let's let it come up. Joe Burrow had a pretty, I'm not going to say he had an average day at the office, but he was pretty, it was more game manager-like. He had 219 and a touchdown, pass rating of 139.5, no interceptions. He got sacked twice. Lamar Jackson for the Chargers. As I get to the bottom, he had 3 interceptions and 2 touchdowns. He put up 101 passer rating with 353 yards on the ground. A lot of those yards came late in the game as they were trying to fight from behind. Let's go to the rushing. Neither team really did a good job on the ground running. But let's see. Cordero Patterson led 6 for 26. Joe Mixon, the star running back for the Bengals, we're going to let it come up on the screen, had 15 carries for 25 yards. The Chargers defense had a good day stopping the run. Lamar Jackson had 1 carry for 13 yards and a touchdown. And Joe Burrow ran for 16 yards. Ezekiel Elliott only had 1 carry for 6 yards. And Travion Williams had 1 carry for 2 yards. Moving along to the receiving. Justin Jefferson had 7 for 220 and a touchdown. Gerald Everett had 3 for 68. Battaglia had a 60-yard reception on the opening drive that ended up turning into a touchdown. Jamar Chase, the star receiver for the Bengals, had 2 for 51 in a touchdown. It's going to go up and pop him on the screen. T. Higgins had 2 for 38. Odell Beckham had 4 for 33. Joe Mixon had 3 for 31. So kind of a balanced day throwing the ball for the Bengals, whereas it was Justin Jefferson or bust for the Chargers. Moving along to the defense. Let's record the defensive stats. Okay, gonna let sacks come up. Trey Henderson led the way with 2 sacks. Akeem Davis Gaither had a sack. Tyson Anderson had a sack and an interception. Joey Bosa had a sack. Gallimore had a sack, half sack, and so did TJ Green. So kind of a balanced day in the sack department for these guys. And moving over to the interception total, Tyson Anderson, Trey Flowers, and Brandon Wilson, all 3 had interceptions in this game. Tyson actually had a pick 6. So the Bengals was another team that pulled off a road victory in the wild card round. So that was one. They were actually 2 of everyone pulled off a road victory with the exception of 2 games. That was the Atlanta game and the Baltimore game. So moving over to the NFC to show the shocking upset that took place in New York as the New Orleans Saints, who barely snuck in the playoffs, took down Coach Shay and the New York Giants. Waiting on the score to come up. As you see, the Saints pulled off a 4th quarter rally to beat them by 4. Let's go to the stats. Derek Carr had 3 touchdowns and a pick, only got sacked once. Daniel Jones had 244, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions on the day. So the Saints defense came up clutch as they pulled off a win. Let's move on to the rushing total. DeAndre Swift had 15 for $114 and a touchdown. Saquon Barkley, the leading rusher for the Giants. Let's let it come up on the screen. It's going to skip past and then go right back. Okay, Saquon Barkley had 14 for 47 and only and nothing else on the ground. So they kept him in check, and Daniel Jones had a 40-yard run in this game. Moving on to the receiving total. Let's let it come up on the screen. Leading the way in receiving was Darren Waller. He had 9 for $157 and 2 touchdowns in the loss. Michael Gallup led the way for the New Orleans Saints. He had 5 for $106 and no touchdowns. Sterling Shepard had 3 for 62 and a touchdown. Chris Olave had 5 for 55 and 2 touchdowns. Taysom Hill had 2 for 48. DeAndre Swift had 3 for 26. And Juwan Johnson, the tight end, had 1 catch for 21 yards and a key touchdown in that ball game. Now let's move over to the defensive side of things, and let's see who led the way in sacks. It was Alexander Johnson, middle linebacker, and David Onyemata, who both got a sack in the game each for the Giants and the Saints. Reed Blankenship got a sack for the Saints, and so did Sean Lattimore, the Pro Bowl corner. Now, as far as interceptions, let's let it come up on the screen. Reed Blankenship had a half sack and a pick. He may be player of the game in this game. Tyrann Mathieu got a pick. Bobby O had an interception for the Giants, and James Bradbury had a pick for the Eagles. That came from the Eagles to the Saints. So New Orleans pulls off a big win. They got another tough task on their hand against the Arizona Cardinals this week in Arizona. Moving along to the Atlanta Falcon game. The Falcons had a big day at the office. This game was never close. It was 52-28. Let's go over to the stat line. And Desmond Ridder by far had the best day of Wild Card weekend, throwing 463 for 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. The rookie had a day to remember. Aaron Rodgers had by far his worst playoff game in his career, 201 yards passing, 1 touchdown and 4 picks, with a quarterback rating of an awful 43.1 rushing. Let's move over to the rushing numbers. Aaron Jones had 8 for a buck 04 and 2 touchdowns. Cabrera only had 10 for 36, and AJ Dillon had 1 carry 4 yards. So not a lot on the ground, but the showstopper of the week is coming up, and that was Stephon Diggs, 8 catches for 213 and 3 touchdowns. Damiere Byrd, the veteran receiver who's been around the league a lot, had 3 for 97 and 2 touchdowns. Kyle Pitts had 5 for 97 and 2 touchdowns. Mercedes Lewis had 3 for 73. Devontae Adams had 4 for 64. Van Jefferson had 2 for 38, and Christian Watson was held to 25 yards receiving in the game. Moving over to the defense. Let's get ready to come to the stats. Okay, Lorenzo Carter, the veteran out of UGA, had a sack and a half. Wharton had a sack. Casey Hayward, the veteran, had a sack. And Andrew Van Winkle also had a sack. So the Atlanta defense kept Desmond Ridder clean, which is awesome. Let's go to the interceptions. Kevin King got a pick, the former Packer. Devondre Cameron, the former Falcon, had an interception. Brandon Jones had a pick. Richie Grant had a pick. Kaylon Barnes had a pick. And J.C. Jackson, who was traded to Atlanta from the Chargers, also had an interception. So big day for the Falcons. They got a game coming up at home against the Seahawks because of the Saints beating the Giants. So they got another home game. And for the record, the Falcons have won the last 2 games against the Seattle Seahawks in the playoffs. So should be a fun one to watch. Moving on to the last game of Wild Card Weekend is the Lions and the Seahawks. As you see, this was a back and forth affair. This game actually ended with a pick in the end zone by the Seahawks as the Lions were driving. This was a good ball game. Probably the best ball game of the week. But let's move to the stats. In the battle of the 2 rookies, Sam Howell had a perfect passer rating for 293 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Matt Corral had 376 with 3 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Still had a good quarterback rating on the day, but again, the Seahawks pulled off the win. Moving along to the rushing. Kenneth Walker had 23 for 57, no touchdowns. Tony Pollard, the leading rusher for the Lions, had 8 for 43, no touchdowns. Matt Corral got one carry for 10 yards. DJ Dallas had 1 run that extended the drive. Sam Howell ran twice for 7 yards, and David Montgomery ran a touchdown in. Let's go to receiving. Brandon Cooks had 11 catches for a $186 and 2 touchdowns. Dan Chisena, if there's any player that has been the most impressive breakout guy this year, has been Dan Chisena. He had 3 for 143 yards receiving and a touchdown. Robbie Anderson had 2 for 75 and a touchdown. Jamison Williams also had 2 for 72 and a touchdown. Let's see, the other guys was Khalif Raymond had 3 for 48. Brock Wright had 2 for 41, and Tony Pollard had 2 for 29. Let's move over to the defense and see what the defensive units did. And before we switch it over, I want to just go ahead and make it known, neither team got a sack in this game, which is wild. So both credit to both the Seahawks and the Lions offensive line. Now, as far as interceptions on the day, you got Kenneth Sheffield with a pick. You have Ryan Neal that had an interception. Isaiah Dunn and Justin Reed also had an interception in this game. So very, very impressive day by the Seattle secondary to keep that Lion pass attack from cutting up all over the field. Now going back to let's go back to the main screen. Give it a second. I clicked a little too far out. Let's go back to the main screen. Okay, here we go. So this is the divisional matchups. These games will be getting ready to get played soon. Be on the lookout for the Jaguars owner, Buddy Buckets. I'm sure he has a stream coming of his playoff upset against Coach Antoine Carroll and the Tennessee Titans. And can't wait to see what he's going to do against the Miami Dolphins. The spread for this game is going to be a 13-point favorite to the Miami Dolphins. So far, according to Gamer Huddle, with an 89% chance of winning. On to the Saints and Cardinals, the number one seed in the NFC with the best record in the league. The Cardinals has a 22-point favorite odd over the New Orleans Saints. So, but the Saints have been hot. They got you into the playoffs. They had another tough opponent. So don't count those Saints out. We'll see what happens in that game. The third game, the Baltimore Ravens and the Bengals. This is the one that we know can go either way between these two guys. Both two of the better users in the league. The Ravens have been favored by 5 at home against the Cincinnati Bengals. And last but not least, the Atlanta Falcons at home against the Seattle Seahawks. And they are a 10-point favorite as we enter this game. So that's the odds basically for those games. Let's get a chance to see the players of the week in playoff week before we wrap this stream up. Let's go to the weekly awards. And the award winners were Desmond Ridder for the Atlanta Falcons. He had 21 for 29, 463, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks, and 1 carry. Khalif Barnes had a pick 6. So he was a defensive player of the week. Justin Herbert, 13 of 17, 327, 3 touchdown passes. And Josh Allen for the Jaguars, 6 tackles, a sack, a pick, and a forced fumble. So this was basically the breakdown of Wild Card Weekend. Now the divisional playoffs are here, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. And we're also looking forward to see who's going to end up being the game that we will be calling for the AFC and NFC championship game. But until then, this has been Nate Schefter giving you all the updates from around the smoke, all the smoke, and everything dealing with the smoke. So until next time, this has been a divisional playoff preview. Good luck to the final 8 teams remaining. And guess what? We are closing in on a potential Super Bowl. We don't know who's going to be, but good luck to the remaining teams that are here. So until next time, this has been a preview from the Around the Smoke Divisional Playoff Studio.